I'm Fox Harrell, professor of digital media and artificial intelligence at MIT. I'm in both the comparative media studies program and also in the computer science and artificial intelligence lab. And I'm also the director of the Center for Advanced Virtuality. So there are two parts of the question. One is the technology, and the other part is what is meant by the current climate. So in terms of the current climate, there are many different facets to it because, of course, there are the aspects of the global pandemic that are explored by epidemiologists and so forth. Then we also have all of the kind of incipient injustices that come from this in terms of inequitable kinds of access to care and so forth. And then finally is the social distancing and the fact that in some sense, we are all virtual. That is, we are interacting with each other, even right now during this interview, through some kind of medium of virtuality, where there's a computational representation of ourselves rather than the physical world face-to-face conversation. So with the first part, one thing is I think we can help people to understand systematic phenomena. So for example, we can model an ecology at human scale. We can model the impacts of social distancing. We can take something which is at a global scale and give people at their own scale a way to interact with it. That is, we can conduct in some way what happens if we make a simulation of the rates of social distancing go up with a gesture or go down, and in a very intuitive way control the way that we perceive this phenomenon. We can also model social phenomena. So for example, the kinds of inequities that exist now and how they impact communities differently. And then finally, a lot of our research is about ways people can perform better, are more engaged and more reflective when they use a virtual self or virtual environment. And we've done studies that show the best conditions that we've run studies of tens of thousands of users, even in some cases, where we can show the best condition for using a virtual self to have better performance in learning, to be more engaged, and to actually reflect, not just complete, say, a training module for your corporation, but actually reflect and learn from that module. When we model phenomena, we can create social simulations, we can democratize access to works at a distance, and we can bring everything we have from embodied communication into the virtual realm. That is body language, gesture, facial expression, and more that we wouldn't necessarily have in more conventional means of telecommunication. There are a lot of phenomena that transfer over from the physical world into the virtual environment. So we need to be aware of those types of phenomena. So for example, when you have a girl learning computer science in an online learning platform and her test scores go down because of a phenomenon sociologists call stereotype threat that is triggered because of the demographic boxes that she has checked on this, that's going to transfer over into the virtual environment. So we need to be able to mitigate those kind of concerns with the way that we implement our systems. At the same time, there are great new possibilities in these kind of systems. That is, we can see ourselves in some ways as whomever and whatever we want to be within these kind of realms. And we need to understand those impacts. So we've actually run studies of these kind of impacts, both in global social media, in global video games, any system where there's an avatar account or profile. And we've shown what are the best practices to use in these kind of cases. Just one instance is if you show an avatar that looks like yourself when you're doing well and have a more sober display or pop-up that doesn't show you when you're in some area where you have room for improvement, people's performance and engagement goes much higher than the other. That's just one example of a result that we've produced in this kind of work. And then finally, we can take into account what are the phenomena built into currently existing systems. So we've used deep learning and AI techniques to show that a best-selling video game that produced about 9 times the revenue of Star Wars on its best weekend on the first day of release of this video game. We showed, for instance, if you play as a female character, you're going to be disadvantaged in any of the major play patterns. So we can actually help you to watch out for these kind of phenomena and implement more creative as well as cost-effective solutions that don't have those kind of negative impacts. We actually co-convened a meeting of a lot of the major US museums just recently. And there were a number of kind of challenges that were being faced. So to begin with, just thinking about what does it mean to display, to curate, to exhibit in this era of social distancing. And there also were very immediate kind of needs, because at the same time as thinking about innovative new ways to allow people to engage what these museums and heritage sites have to offer, there are the immediate challenges with not having audiences, not having revenue, employees being furloughed, and so forth. And so the first is ways to engage audiences to support the museum ecosystem and recovery. I think there's great urgency to think about the impact of virtuality on these kinds of cultural spaces now. So for instance, besides the ability to say go inside of works, to personalize the experience of different kind of works, to create spaces that are tailored using technology for diverse audiences, and then also to be able to allow people to access these kind of works at great distances that and works that people wouldn't normally have access to. We have an imperative now, which is to allow people to have the intimate experiences they expect with culture, with art, and so forth, but at a social distance. And so one of the kind of things that this technology can allow is for us to have a telepresence, to be able to see ancillary information about works, to guide people through museum spaces in novel ways that keeps distance, but also adds value to the experience. So there's just a lot of great urgency. These technologies that at some point for museums might have been seen as a nice to have now are comprehensively understood as a must have. I mean, there's great potential for this kind of medium to impact users. And first, again, I think about technologies of virtuality as not just the VR headset, but it includes the VR headset, it includes augmented reality, mixed reality, but other types of media that also paint a layer of imagination on top of the physical world. So for instance, we've been doing some work with synthetic media as well. For instance, Fran Panetta, who came over to us from The Guardian in the UK, is a creative director in the center and co-directed a project with Halsey Bergen, which is called In Event of Moon Disaster. This is a synthetic media work, so it actually uses AI. It creates a deep fake, which is postulating what Nixon would have said if the moon landing had been unsuccessful. So it actually uses a beautiful elegiac speech that was written by Bill Sapphire and recreates this in terms of the video and audio. The aim of this work is far from trying to fool users. Actually, it's presented in settings where people have newspapers that also describe how deep fakes are made, what are the kind of social issues around them, and actually educates the user, helps users to become more discerning about this type of medium. And so that's more broadly thinking, how can we use synthetic media creatively, as in this project, as well as combating some of the more negative uses of synthetic media and making people more aware. We've also done work such as simulations for conceptual change and behavior change. We've done a simulation of sexism in the workplace that we can measurably show that people can self-reflect and even change their attitudes after using the experience. So one of my PhD students, Danielle Olson, and I have created a work which is called Passage Home VR, which is a VR experience that makes people aware of how they're socialized to think about race. It's used for anti-bias training for teachers and students alike, and a host of other projects in this area. The key, the common denominator in all of these is that we're doing social simulations, we're doing the work to make them engaging aesthetic experiences, and we're doing the science to make sure that they're experiences that work.